Good morning, everybody in the US, and good afternoon, everybody in Kiev and elsewhere in Europe. My name is Anders Åslund. I'm a senior fellow at the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council. And our guest today is Minister of Economic Development, Trade and Agriculture of the Ukraine, Ihor Petrashko. And Igor is an old friend of mine, so it's a great pleasure to me to have you as a guest today. On the 17th of March, you became minister appointed by the Verkhovna Rada, the sound majority. And before, from 2013 to 2020, you worked as Deputy General Director and CFO of Åslund Farming, the biggest Ukrainian agricultural company. And you have also worked as a partner of Ernst & Young. You have a wonderful US education as MBA of Vanderbilt University. So few are as well prepared as you for becoming Minister for Economic Development, Trade and Agriculture, an enormous portfolio covering everything that you can think of, from trade, regulation, privatization to agriculture. So my first question to you today, Igor, is what do you see as your three biggest goals? What do you want to achieve as a minister?
Yeah, thank you, Anders, for the introduction, and I really appreciate having this call. There has been already, I just realized it's more than 2 months since I am a minister already, so have 60 plus days. Okay, I thought that we lost everyone there for a minute. Very challenging. It was very unexpected there, so because yes, I did work. And can you hear me? Because I'm kind of see that the image froze from you.
Now you're fine.
Okay, because I see
you froze for a minute. You're fine now.
Okay, excellent. This was a very interesting and challenging months for me there. So obviously I work in different organizations, building teams, working on large companies there, but the government work is completely different there. So I frankly never expected this to be that much different, but I'm glad that I took this responsibility because it was really interesting and challenging, and I think this will actually continue forward. Obviously, like the first priority when I came was the start of the quarantine and coronavirus fight in Ukraine. So that's why many priorities has been shifted from like normal work to ad hoc solutions and decisions and support of the people who I need, because we're also responsible for the unemployment, the organization, and many of those situations as well are under where I'm sorry, I will actually disconnect. Many of these situations were requiring immediate attention. So the focus was, first of all, to support businesses and communities when also talking to internal stakeholders, the Cabinet of Ministers, Office of the President. So it was a kind of competition all the time there between the like health and economy and everything there. So, and as a Minister of Economy and Agriculture, I was trying to make sure that the least harm is done to business that operate. Also, we understood clearly that the lockdown needs to happen, and I think that's the story how we are actually going through it in Ukraine is one of the exceptional ones. But this was the first priority, to make sure that the business will suffer in the least possible ways. Like you remember, like those discussions on the opening of markets in Ukraine, where people trade, and was quite interesting and challenging. Now, Second, obviously, is to come up with the solutions and suggestions how we can support the growth and to solve the, would say, long-standing Ukrainian dilemma that we do many right things, but at the same time, people are not happy there, and the economy is not growing, and we do like maybe small steps, but not drastic steps, and that was. And is the first main challenge with which I was coming to lead the Ministry of Economy there, because I kind of felt that maybe I can offer something more fundamental, how to solve those dilemmas and make the system work. Because the first thing I came actually, before I came as a Minister of Economy, I read what the economic ministry should do in different countries. And one of the main things is just to provide and to create and manage the conditions in which the economic entities operate. And that is a very more important thing. So Minister of Economy currently manages many things which are not traditional, like state enterprises, which should be privatized, obviously there, and but should be privatized in the right manner there as well. Doing other things which do not relate like to the managing of economy, but instead of reacting to ad hoc cases. So that's why that was my second task, which I see as a minister, is to make sure that we can build a system in which economic decisions made by different ministries or the government itself in general, or the parliament even, as we actually have a recommendational voice and our opinion matters for many of those economic decisions, are made in some overall strategy lines there. So this is not like some random decisions. So we try to understand how the decision influence like the general economic climate. And third, it combines, it is, I would define it actually as the making sure that Ukrainian companies, and not only Ukrainian, but Ukrainian, I mean companies that operate in Ukraine, including foreign companies that operate in Ukraine, have the best competitive advantages compared to neighboring countries. And by creating competitive advantages, I mean different things there. So there are lines of things. Obviously, we need to get higher in the doing business ratings of different sources there, which we are very low. And this includes the regulation, rule of law, privatization, fiscal stability, labor code, all other and all important areas which has been big progress has been done already, but insufficient as to my point of view there, because sufficient will be when the Ukraine will start growing 8+% per year in GDP. Then I think this would be sufficient, and we can all rest. And I know, Anders, you have been a big, and you are a big friend of Ukraine and big supporter of Ukraine, and many things in Ukrainian policies has been done with your advice there. And I think we all will be satisfied if we will see that Ukraine is growing like 8+%. Then we will say, okay, we've done the right things, and now we can do even more. So that would be three areas which were in my head when I started the job, and this continues. Obviously, now there will be some amendments, corrections there, giving the new challenges there and new realities there. But that was actually right the first day when I started the work.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ihor. You froze for a few seconds on a few occasions. Let me just summarize. So that what I heard were three major goals. First, to handle the quarantine, to keep the economy going and health security. The second, to get the state enterprises into some order and privatize as necessary. And third, they get a good business environment so that Ukraine can really grow at a high speed at 8% or more. So let us take then the first task that you discussed here, that is the most obvious, that is how you and the rest of the government are handling the COVID-19 crisis. President Zelenskyy just said in his big press conference that he thought that this was the area where Ukraine had really done very well during its first year. Before you answer, let me tell all the participants here that if you are on Zoom, you can use the question and answer mechanism. So please write the question into the Q&A box, and I will read out the questions as they come up naturally in the conversation. So how is the COVID-19 crisis, and what are you doing about it?
Anders, my opinion, and I think this is a more or less opinion of the expert communities, that the handling of the crisis has been quite well there. If we're talking about the medical situation, so Ukraine has a very decent line compared to the other countries, and we are going in line, I think, with the best European practices like Poland, very close, and some areas better, some areas are less. Second of all, we have managed, I think, economy as well with least possible restrictions there, and we have closed some of the areas, but we have not closed like all the economy there. We closed some, I would say, businesses which were most hazardous, taking into account like the potential spread of infection. So all others, including the enterprises, industrial, agriculture, have been opened. So we also acted quite fast in terms of reopening the economy, and we do hope that, and are cautious obviously this decision, but we have a plan. We have adaptive quarantine there. We're monitoring everything on a daily basis there, and as well making those decisions on a 10-day increments there. Depending, when we open something, we see if the trend and parameters that we put for ourselves in terms of actually the disease are in line, then we're opening the next round. So far, it's working quite well and the right thing. I also praise the government in terms of their not closing the export markets there, and there have been many voices there to say that, oh, we need to close everything, the export agriculture and stuff there, and there has been some pressure as well from different associations in Ukraine there, and political forces to say, oh, let's do this. Russia closed it, Belarus closed it, Romania closed it, and some other countries actually are closing, so why not Ukraine? And we praise ourselves that we actually had this voice of reason, and we did not. We had a memorandum with the grain traders there, which were a market instrument there, and there are no complaints, and I think most of the associations praising the government. That was the most I say efficient decision-making process during the crisis. We also introduced because there was a law adopted by this the parliament there in terms of the price regulation, and we adopted this in a cabinet of ministers in the most I would say proper way, in a declarative way, instead of actually potentially coming to wrong Soviet Union type of decisions when we control prices. And this price off, and that was important. We maintained price stability on the food markets, and as well we managed that the supplies have not been interrupted, because Ukrainians are always afraid that during the crisis there are some unexpected situations there, and that there is either price increases or government regulations unnecessary, or shortages or other things, and this hasn't happened. So I also think that it was a very important thing that the government came praise itself. We hope, we have the numbers to say that this should continue in the same manner there, because we are not over the coronavirus yet. We continue to open the economy there. Now we actually need to continue to open the connections with neighboring countries, but we never closed actually the supply of goods and services there. And we maintained the European market with European Union open all the time there, in terms of the traffic, in terms of the carriers, in terms of actually trade. So this is important.
Yeah, let me continue on this. I have here a question from Raymond Baka asking, could the influx of Ukrainian migrants from Poland and the placement pose a threat to the country's COVID response? But let me broaden the question. It has been a big discussion about migrants and remittances, that remittances will be probably $3 billion less this year, 2% of GDP or so. And at the same time, there has been a big discussion about whether Ukrainian migrant workers can go for summer work in various West European countries. Well, it's Poland, the UK, Sweden, Finland, that have been mentioned. How do you look upon this? What is the government doing for or against these activities? What is important for the government?
Yeah, it's very, very important actually question. This was one of the areas we looked closely, because we do have many people working abroad there, and many of them came. So obviously we took this very seriously. We established a program whereby there is an application on the phone. I think many countries did this, but also we did the same in Ukraine. They would install it once they actually cross the border, and then they will be monitored like at home there. So they need to be under observation, as we say. So they stay at home, but they need actually to stay at home for a period of up to 2 weeks to make sure that they are not pose a threat to others. We monitored and closed some of the entrance on the border there, but we maintain open those borders with most of the countries. But we just suggested that whoever comes back there, they need actually to also not to pose a threat to the general population. So, and this application is helping, and it's working still right now. In terms of the remittances, very important actually question there. So far, until end of March, the remittances has been higher than comparatively to last year, but this was before coronavirus. We created some of the programs where we want to, and then remittances are important. But more even important is that the people actually have jobs to support their families there, because if they cannot work, and then this will become a not Ukrainian problem only, but it will become a regional problem there with many people unemployed. So far we have unemployment under control. It is growing, so we increased like the access to the unemployment benefits to a broader population, and we also introduced a program so-called temporary unemployment relief, whereby we compensate employers for employees who are not working full day. I think this was kind of.
Can you repeat the last minute? You were completely frozen here.
It's so-called, like, as we call it, temporary unemployment support, whereby we compensate the employers for paying employees salaries during a time of quarantine if the businesses were closed or partly closed. So this also helps us to decrease the pressure on unemployment and to help to jumpstart the economy as fast as possible. I think this was a Ukrainian know-how, and it's showing quite good promises and progress. How it works: if an employer, for example, a cafeteria or even a larger business, they because of coronavirus need to send like 20% or 10% of people home. there, but they want to retake them in 1 month or 2 after coronavirus. We say, don't lay them off. We will pay you up to minimum salary, obviously not the full salaries, for the unemployed amount. So if somebody is not working 40 hours a week, but is working 10 hours a week right now, so we would pay for this 30. And this helps to jumpstart the economy and also eases the pressure on the state benefits there. But in terms of actually the the people who were working abroad, obviously we are not closing the borders there. So we just want to be sure that first of all, the countries actually where they are going need to be open to take them. And second of all, we also need to be sure that we will not be actually having a commuting virus, as we call it, that the people will go there person and will come back in 2 days, and that will be actually a health disaster. So that's why we introduced that once you cross the border back, you need to spend 2 weeks on a self-isolation at home. And we also have a program of creating like 500,000 jobs in Ukraine. We create conditions. Obviously, state does not create jobs, 500,000, but we stimulate creating conditions for jobs. They're aimed at the people exactly who come from European Union countries there and who right now cannot find work. So far, the numbers are encouraging there. We do have the numbers of unemployment growing, but it's not drastic growth there. And we eased out the access, so we can be pretty much sure that who wants to apply for unemployment, they can apply. So we introduced electronic.
Thank you very much. Let me turn to the fundamental question here, and that is, it's not decided as yet, but when would you guess that Europeans will be allowed to enter Ukraine without 2 weeks of quarantine? And when people from the US can enter Ukraine without 2 weeks of quarantine? What's your best guess?
This is obviously a decision which will be made in steps there.
I know.
This will take this will be done when we reopen the air travel completely, and this will be done on reciprocal basis with different countries, because right now also Ukrainians cannot travel. US is different there, but US is special there. But European Union mostly actually requires the same things, except they now say actually seasonal workers, please come. Countries in Southern Europe like Greece say, because they depend on the tourism there. But we need to be careful in that. So my assumption that as soon as air travel will open, we will see ease of those restrictions there. So we are talking about, I think that the plan for the opening of air traffic is slightly like somewhere mid-June, but there will be likely more beginning of July when there will be more frequent travel and ease out on conditions on air travel, which obviously will be result in the accepting already more normal rules for travelers there. But this decision again has not been made. We have this plan of reopening there, but we monitor on a 10-day increments. If we see that in 10 days after we open something, the situation is the same or improved, we do the next steps. If we see that there are worsening conditions, we either stop and postpone, or we can even come back and increase quarantine. That's nothing new. Every country in the world will do this. But so far, we do see encouraging signs. As you've seen on Monday, we opened the subway in Kyiv, and Kyiv is actually a huge city. So now we count on this 10-day period to see that there are no increase in the health risks, and if not, then I think will be high probability they will come to the next step, ease out of travel restrictions.
Thank you very much. Let's hope so that we can come to
yes,
Ukraine soon again. Haven't been able to be there since March. I've got another question here. You rightly said that you have managed to stop export controls that have been imposed in Russia and Belarus and Romania for agricultural goods, apart from buckwheat. But there's now a proposal to stop imports, or rather to introduce import quotas for fertilizers.
Mm-hmm.
And within Ukraine, some of the fertilizers Dmitry Firtash has the monopoly on, with 3 factories, and this would drive up the cost. And with your substantial background in agriculture, how do you look upon this, and is this really coming?
Yeah, this is a very sensitive question there, and last week we have received lots of press, I would say, and discussions on different sides there. So what we are doing, and this is our general approach to those situations, that we want to make right decisions there. So we do not want to make any politically motivated decisions at all, and we will not make them. So we took additional time to listen to all parties there, and to get deeper into the analysis of the case. What is happening actually on this particular fertilizer cases? So there are arguments on one side and the other side. On the one side, obviously there is a Firtash actually, mostly, not only, but there is mostly actually Firtash owned Ostchem enterprises there, on which anti-monopoly committee made a decision some time ago that it needs to be separated, and it is now in court. So technically speaking, the state did the right decision before. Now it's actually in the court, but this is actually a normal process in every country there. But this is something which is important to say. Ostchem is there, but there are enterprises there. There are people actually who work on those businesses there. And the market consists, like on the fertilizers that nitrogen based, is mostly like Ukrainian produced. It's about 70% Ukrainian produced, 30% like international. And there is the complex, complex fertilizers there,
15%,
whereby 85% is import and 15% is the local production there. And the complex is even more in fertilizers, more in value there, because they are more important. So what do we want to actually, plus there are Russians there, and most supplies, although they're coming from the EU, they still come from Russia in different, I mean, this is actually the case, in different formats there, through European Union countries there, but this is still a Russian businesses and supplies. So there is actually a little bit complex situation to view it. We want to achieve 2 things. First of all, we want to make sure that those enterprises will not close in Ukraine, because this will not be the right thing. We understand that they are less competitive a little bit because they get gas now from European Union there, so it's at least as expensive as in EU. Second of all, there are 5,000 or more people working in those enterprises, and they represent a sector which obviously we do not want to be closed for any reasons, whether they are owned by Firtash or anyone else, because that's not the right way to do. Third, it's also in the interest of Ukrainian agricultural producers to have the balance there. Fourth, we realize that we cannot allow monopolization in the Ukrainian market. We cannot allow uncontrolled increase in prices there, because this would hurt everyone, especially agricultural producers and the competition. So we are not making actually fast or harsh decisions right now, but we are debating with all parties there, so including the representatives of European Union. There are actually also involvement from the United States, from Ukrainian Agro Association, from the Association of Chemists there. And with all that, we would like to come up to a decision which will be in the benefit of the country and of the agriculture producer itself, taking into account that the prices obviously should not be manipulated because there are quotas or anything like that. So this will not be actually the decision, or we introduce quota and that's it, and that this would not be that kind of decision. It is not made, and we invite, I mean, if someone is interested, like from this audience, to participate, and this is what we would do. Taras Kachka is here with me there, so say hello there. It's my deputy responsible as well for all those negotiations and leads all those discussions.
We know him.
He has been accused on two sides already that he's supporting Russian interests. On the other case, he's not supporting Russian interests. But we want to do the right thing. Like, as I said, like at the beginning, that Minister of Economy should do the rules of the game and not politically charged because somebody actually presses or pushes on different fronts. So I think all the market will be satisfied with the decision we make there, because this would be the right decision. We will explain it why we are making it, and we will monitor how it is implemented and done.
Well, I hope this means that there won't be any quotas for fertilizer. Well, I hear you. Let me continue. I have a question here from Jim Broke, and he says, 2 years from now, if you look back, what sectors of Ukraine's economy will have proved to be the most promising for investors?
Well, obviously, I strongly believe that it should be innovative sectors there. First of all, it's those sectors which relate to IT, but IT is already not the right word. So we have lots of IT specialists there. They actually are well paid. They generate lots of work for European Union, for US, especially companies, for Canadians there. But we are talking about moving further into the creating clusters there, whereby not individual IT specialists create some product for outsourcing. This should continue and should grow. But whereby and I think this also a perfect area for investments, creating a new clusters. I'm not saying like Google right now or Microsoft in the old days or others there, but I'm talking actually about clusters whereby there will be specialists in the industry working, creating not a product already, but some new innovations there. Something actually which we do, but it's done more on a case-by-case basis there. And this is something where we can start to contribute to the world. Final product, not actually that US is asking actually, oh, please make a code or part of that, but creating a new iPhone, a new, I don't know, like some virtual reality, a new, like there are several examples like Grammarly and like those phones and others, final products, because we have the potential, we have the people there. And now I think those people can come together, and with the right investments and the right management from international guys and private equity organizations, they can start creating those areas by bringing 10, 20, 100, 50, 200 people, creating a product, and then selling those companies to international counterparts that are interested in integrating those and will be based in Ukraine. So this is something which I think is the most promising there, just as an area for innovation and where we do have competitive advantage. Second, as you understood, we are the Ministry of Everything and industrial and agriculture there, so I need to say something in agriculture. I think Ukrainian agriculture potential is well still under explored, and there is a great area which is irrigation in the south, and it is huge. You know, like in California where they have like 2 harvests there, and Ukraine, we also can have much higher yields in southern areas of Ukraine, which are currently underinvested. Currently actually have lots of issues with droughts and everything there, but have the best probably land by quality of soil, but no access to irrigation. We want to, there used to be 2.5 million hectares under irrigation under the Soviet Union. Not efficient there, lots of water wasted. Now technologies are different there. Now we have around 300,000 only. So obviously some areas left with Crimea, but we still have, it's even what was there already. Just this is the area with the privatization of land now being opened, not moratorium being lifted, and the market will be open. This is something which can actually people start to think, because in irrigation you need to invest. If you use like the technologies from United States, this is one technology. There is, I know that because you know I worked in this sector for some time. There is also technology from Israel there, which are more I would say there is less water in Israel, so obviously there is more efficient there. There is a little bit more water in the United States, so there's less efficient there, but it's a combination. Obviously will be all factors there, but this is something which is a great area because you can get very high returns, very high yields, and we as the state see this as a priority for development. This will create enormous amount of jobs in the south, and it will actually increase significantly the production in those areas by 2 million or 4 million tons easily.
What about the European Association Agreement, the European supply chain? Is that a big issue? Integration into the European supply chain.
So
I will ask Taras actually to comment there. So.
Yeah, thank you. I think on European supply chain, it's constantly increasing in both in industry and agriculture. In agriculture, I think that we have one simple indicator that we now exporting to the EU about 15 millions of tons of corn, which is used for feeding animals, and so that's all a lot of meat and dairy products in the EU are produced with feeding animals with Ukrainian corn. So it's like a systemic cooperation, and we have other examples of this. On industrial level, it is less visible, but the one of best example is the car clusters, a cluster in western Ukraine with a set of companies supplying different spare parts to Germany for car production. And we see that this car cluster is illustrated that how Ukrainian economy is adapting itself to new circumstances, because they survived the extremely let's say the deficit of workforce when people actually immigrated to Poland for economic reasons, and otherwise they also survived the higher salaries and say more costly hryvnia last year when the cost of production increased in Ukraine. So and they continue to be stable supplier of spare parts to Europe, and this is like an example of other industries where the supply chain is let's say we are more and more integrated to the EU like economic universe.
I will just add like two things that obviously like those crises now is the obviously this crisis is now as well the opportunity for us. So what we are hearing, and this is more from even with United States, it was European Union, but I also would like to comment that United States is discussing, and obviously and many countries discussing new world not order, probably too hard word for that, but trade order there. And there are many challenges now whether EU and US should continue to have such big reliance on production in certain Asian countries there. So we are working right now already with several initiatives from United States, whereby the businesses say that they would like to consider alternative production areas there. This includes automotive, this includes pharmaceutical there, and there is a realization it will be more expensive than in China, because China efficiency obviously is very high right now there, and the volumes obviously, but this is something they want actually for diversification. Obviously, we are more than open to take those additional opportunities and to be more integrated there. So we will do everything possible to attract such interest there and to provide the best conditions possible for those creating big clusters of production in Ukraine to be integrated more into supply chains with European Union. Because so far we realize that the protection is also there, and the concentration will be that bring production into our own countries, into the EU and US, but not all productions can be taken. And we hope that our EU association agreement will be able to utilize in the proper way in order to bring some of the productions from the countries, not naming those countries, but we all understand what we're talking about, to Ukraine in particular.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a couple of questions here. One from about state support for enterprises. One from Jean-André Barbosa. An important issue in European countries concerned with small and medium-sized enterprises. How can you assure their liquidity and allow them to go through the crisis? So this is a COVID crisis question. And what measures in this regard have you undertaken? And a similar question from Robert Kirchner, which is a bit broader. What are you doing about state loan guarantees to enterprises in the COVID crisis?
I couldn't hear like the first question there. So you're from
the first is state support for small and medium-sized enterprises
in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. In Ukraine, of course, yes. What
this
is
is
the government doing?
Yeah, this is a big priority for us, and so far we responded by one big program there. I will not comment already on this temporary unemployment, because this also supports all kind of enterprises in the time of need there, but primarily by retaining employees and paying for those employees. But we also restructured the 579 so-called program, which allows access to credit for small and medium enterprises. They're more like small enterprises, but anyway, we made it, actually changed it so they can apply if they have loans already in the bank, so they can apply to the bank and receive for 1 year a 0 interest rate on their loans. They are subsidized by the state. So far, this program is still actually rolling there. So the banks are very slow on responding there. So, but we're trying to make sure that they're responding to it properly. But this is a program which already is on the table. And this should be very helpful. Potentially up to 30 billion hryvnias in loans, or even more, 40, can be restructured in that way. And this is especially for micro and small businesses there. We have the second program, which we are discussing, it's on the table, but in order for this, we need a change in the legislation, and we submitted this to the Verkhovna Rada, whereby there will be new rules for providing the government guarantees. So far, the government guarantees can be provided only for individual loans. We want to utilize the practice which exists in the EU and the United States and other countries, whereby such guarantees can be applied for a portfolio of loans. What it means, if Verkhovna Rada supports us, government will be able, Minister of Finance will be able to provide guarantees to the banks on part of the portfolios. So this also, the primary idea is to utilize it for micro and small businesses there, because right now it's very difficult for them, impossible to get any support. Government has limited resources in the budget. Also, we supplied different incentives, and we are preparing a larger presentation to show what we've done already there, but has limited resources going forward in the government, in the budget there. So what we want to do, we want to transfer some of the risks from the banks towards programs or enterprises which government thinks is important, and micro and small businesses exactly this area. So we say, please continue to lend to the small and micro businesses. Please continue actually provide them with a low interest rate, which will subsidize, not for all, but for the cluster. I'm against actually supporting individual enterprise because this is corruption and everything. But we are talking about clusters, and that what your question you're asking exactly about clusters, micro and small businesses as a class for everyone. Because it's important for Ukrainian economy to have those people supported, to have them continue to provide services. So this is the idea. If we get support from the government, those guarantees will be extended to the banks. We'll share, not take 100%, we'll share the risk with the banks, but the banks will share the risk with the state, and by that way they will be able to provide such needed financing to the micro and small businesses. There are some other discussions, but they are not in this such advanced stage. But I would hope actually for the support of international community on that, of expanding, be supportive towards businesses, meaning that, for example, that whereby state would provide like $1 billion or euros to the fund. International IFIs, EBRD, IFC, OPIC provide same amount of money there. This fund will be managed actually as the by proper corporate governance standards, and this fund will be providing actually guarantees to the commercial banks on an internationally accepted principles to important areas there. This can be export operations there. This can be IT clusters. This can be some infrastructure areas like the ports or roads. This can be renovation of energy sectors there in terms of the assets there. This can be energy efficiency there, like of usage and for personal use. So this kind of using multiplicator there, because that's how always was done when the country was in crisis. And Ukraine is in crisis not because of coronavirus. We are historically in crisis there, and so far we are not growing there. We've done many right things already. We have big achievements on the corporate governance. We have big achievements actually on the registration of property rights, on even on the court system there. We have big achievements there.
But Igor, let me stop you here.
Please.
On corporate governance, that we are seeing now a massive threat. You had a big salary for good reason in the private sector before, and you had to take a big cut now to about $1,700 a month, 47,000 hryvnia per month, and 10 times the minimum salary, which is now the maximum salary for government employees and also for state enterprise managers. As you know, and coming from the private sector, this is madness. This is driven by your president, I'm afraid. And he is pursuing this populist line in repeated speeches. This cannot be continue. If this will happen, the people who work in the top state positions, either in
this is coronavirus response measure, and I fully agree with you. That's, I mean, to continue on that, and not even for government employees. Government employees obviously should be more restraining there, because it's a little bit different situation. But the supervisory board is a little bit different there, because you want to employ people who need to contribute there, and many of them actually come from businesses and everywhere, and this is a little bit different there. And obviously state-run enterprises should be compensated properly on a market base. So obviously we cannot say that this should be, there has been some overreach there, which created negative, maybe public opinion that, but in say what 90%, this was the right trend, and do have, we right now also have appointments there, like on the state enterprise, and we are signing higher salaries there. Obviously, they are not right now in effect until there is 47,000 limitation, but that's will be lifted once the quarantine is lifted.
Thank you very much. Let's really hope that it is temporary, nothing else. I have here a question from Ambassador William Courtney. The Ukrainian government has said the Prozoro e-government program has saved it several billion dollars. Investors see Prozoro as a successful anti-corruption program. How do you look upon the Prozoro for the future? Will it be expanded? We have here small-scale privatization that has been expanded to. We are also seeing that Prozoro does not work in certain areas, for example, consultancy services or the sales of deposit guarantee fund assets, which are very difficult to assess in value. And you have also talked about it that in certain cases, industrial policy run against it, that you want localization. So what's your overall attitude to Prozoro for the future?
I think there was actually some of them, my words has been misinterpreted all the time there. So Prozoro is a great system there. So when I was actually coming in 2014, before, I'm not in Prozoro, but I had something similar in mind for the state tax administration when I was running actually in this concourse there. And this system allows actually separation from decision maker from the people who benefit and who participate in the tender, and provides access on a very simple basis to the large number of participants there on indiscriminate basis. So it's a good, nice system. But what is important actually to change there? So not in the Prozoro itself. Prozoro is an algorithm, it's a machine. It runs on the assumptions and rules. And right now with Taras as well, we are working and analyzing our international commitments in terms of the EU trade agreement and primarily, less WTO, but still there, and to pinpoint some of the areas whereby we can add additional criteria to stimulate localization of production in Ukraine. This is what is done, and we have this analysis in the EU countries. It is allowed under EU-Ukraine international trade agreements, under WTO, everywhere. So we are saying, not for Ukrainian companies there, but we are saying for whoever wants to, for example, if you create locomotives there, if you want to sell locomotives there, you are international US European company there, you compete there. If you make a commitment to localize like 20%, then this is worth something. This is not only like purely price competition anymore. So if you say, I invest, people will actually pay salaries to the country there. This is actually what is quite normal. So we are thinking on those solutions to help localization in responsive, regardless whether it is a Ukrainian company or international company. But in terms of Prozoro, it's a great system there. It's, I mean, there might be actually some areas to improve there, but I'm not competent actually to address them and to discuss. So there are some experts probably who should do that, but I don't have complaints on Prozoro per se there, but I have complaints in terms of actually the criteria we use there, because there are some absurd situations there. Like, I mean, I can explain that. There are absurd situations in when the Ukrainian companies have to provide dumping in order, or who have localization, provide lower prices in order to win the trade there. So it's shouldn't be like that. So we should and we participate in international trade, and that's very important there. And I think this actually has to grow there. But at the same time, we need to be balanced there. That's what United States as well is doing, and every European Union country. We need to make sure that, and that's in the interest of everybody, that our balance of export and import balance and that there is stimulus as well for big companies like Samsung, like Google, like everyone to also come to Ukraine. It will not only create like the some priorities, we as well create conditions there. So come to Ukraine, work, will be better there. Plus, you will be better positioned actually to participate in some of the on a transparent basis in those international and local trades. We clearly don't want actually to create a situation like it was in Russia there, like in some period of time when actually they created this localization, and when the helicopter would come there and they would actually bring wheels and increase price 30%. This would not be this. So we're working on a very sensitive base, but this needs are clearly allowed and done and pursued by EU in their respective countries, and we want to actually do this as well here. And it's again in the interest of everyone that Ukrainian GDP will grow, and there is no other way as to provide additional resources. One resource obviously is actually stimulating a little bit better access to public finance, maintaining at the same time competition and equal access to all international community, not Ukrainian companies.
Thank you. I think this is a very good note to end to. Thank you very much, Minister Petrashko. We have reached the full hour, and I think
very
that
quick.
the listeners have got a lot of good information and clear views from you in a very lively discussion. I have to apologize to the people who have posed questions, many of them very good, but we didn't have time for all of them. But you have a big area to cover. You have done so very well, but there's a lot more to discuss. Thank you very much, Minister Petrashko, and also thank you very much, First Deputy Minister Tkachka, for your contribution. It has been a great pleasure, and I hope that all you participants have benefited greatly from this as I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Anders.
Wishing you the best of luck.
All the participants. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.